think everybody said they had a folder with the notes in it. Is that correct? All right. We're on the first topic, why should we believe the Bible? And why should we believe the Bible?
Fulfilled prophecy.
Because fulfilled prophecy is the proof. God made predictions in the Bible, and so far every one of them has come true. Not one of them has been wrong, and there's more to come. So I think on your notes, we covered the first topic, fulfilled prophecy is the proof, and then we were looking at specific prophecies about Jesus' birth and about Palm Sunday. And didn't we leave off there? Or did we get into prophecy about his death?
First question on that.
Okay, we just barely touched it, I think. All right. So, fulfilled prophecy about Jesus' death. Isaiah 53, he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. And by his stripes, we are healed. Those are pretty specific prophecies about the death of the Messiah. Wounded, bruised, stripes. And in John 19:1, we read they took Jesus and scourged him. What does scourged mean? Do you know? They whipped him, yeah. So that would be the stripes that Isaiah predicted. They pierced my hands and my feet. What would that? Yeah, that he was wounded. Those were the wounds in his hands and his feet. Then they crucified him, which is to nail somebody to a cross. And then there was a prophecy in Psalm 22:18. They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. And then in Matthew 27:35, we read, they divided his garments, casting lots. Stop and think about that. That's a pretty specific prophecy to the detail. And David wrote Psalm 22 about 1,000 years before it was fulfilled. And, nobody could manipulate that. Jesus didn't manipulate, so I'm going to work out some things here to fulfill prophecy. Who did that? Who divided his garments and cast lots for his clothing? Roman soldiers. The Roman soldiers weren't saying, hey, there's a prophecy back there in Psalms that, we need to make this happen. I'm quite certain that wasn't true. Pardon? Oh, I'm sure it wasn't on their mind, but they were fulfilling prophecy, totally unaware that they were doing it, right down to that detail. So those are just some of the prophecies about his death to, again, give examples of how God prophesied and how this Bible has prophecies that are fulfilled, thus reaffirming the reason that we can believe the Bible. Okay, anybody have a comment about the prophecy about Jesus' death?
The crucifixion, the nails in the hands, did they always see that, or was it usually tied? Somewhere I heard that usually they tied against the cross and didn't nail.
I don't know, I hadn't heard that. Yeah. And I don't, when the Romans crucified Jesus, they weren't saying, well, he's different than all the others. He was just another criminal to them. And every indication is they killed the two criminals to either side the same way they did him. So that would be my thought, that crucifixion was the same for everybody.
Crucifixion had been conceived as he wanted death in Psalms passage.
Yeah, that's what I had read, that it was uniquely Roman, that the Roman Empire didn't exist when David wrote the Psalms.
Something that was distinctly different between the two that were killed beside Jesus on the cross was that they wanted to make them die quickly, because it was Palm Sunday or something was coming up, so they had to do it, so they would always break their legs, and so they broke the legs of the two on either side of them. When they got to Jesus, he was already dead, so that was another fulfilled prophecy that not a single bone on him would ever be broken.
Yeah, that's good. That's another prophecy. Right, I didn't put it down here, but that's, there are a number of them, but these are just some, but that was another one. All right, let's go over to the right-hand column. Fulfilled prophecy about Jesus' burial. They made his grave with the rich at his death, Isaiah 53, 9. And in Matthew 27 we read, there came a rich man named Joseph. When Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his new tomb, which he had hewn out of the rock. So there you have the fulfillment of that, even to the point that Matthew says that Joseph was a rich man and had his own private tomb. They made his grave with the rich at his death. So obviously Jesus wasn't in control of fulfilling that. He was already dead. And there's just another example of a prophecy about Jesus. So this is just a sampling of the prophecies about Jesus. As I said last week, somebody calculated that there were about 300 specific prophecies about Jesus in the Old Testament that were fulfilled. We've just looked at about 7 here in this sampling on your page. Any comments about fulfilled prophecy about Jesus' burial? Mark? Yeah.
It says that Joseph, which he had hewn out of rock. What kind of rock was it? Was it sandstone? Was it granite? Because if you dig it out of granite or very hard rock, that takes some foreknowledge. I would think maybe there's a prophecy that covers that specific.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe somebody else has a comment on that. I don't know.
I think Joseph, it was his tomb that he gave up to Jesus, the one that he had prepared for after his death. But instead of, he offered it up for Jesus.
That's the feeling I get from this. Yeah, it was his private property, right?
There's no granite in that part of the world. Those real hard deposits, they're not there. It's all sandstones and other rocks and stuff that
All
are
right,
not near as large.
all right. Thanks for that background. Mark?
The term by his stripes we are healed, could you make a comment on that phrase? I think some interpret that as being that is a case for automatic healing, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's.
Yeah. What, let me ask, I'll ask a question and I'll try to answer your question by asking a question. In what way are we healed by his stripes? Healed from what? Sin and death, yeah, right. And there's a phrase that comes to mind that I've heard, healing in the atonement, meaning that physical healing. That people claim that because Jesus had, by his stripes, when he was tortured before he died, that's somehow connected to physical healing. And even though I believe that God heals in answer to prayer when he chooses to, and I've seen it and I know that he does that, I don't think that's at all what Isaiah is talking about. Isaiah is talking about being healed, from sin. Yeah. And that's why he died, was to pay for our sins. Okay. let's go to the next category, fulfilled prophecy in 70 AD. Daniel made a prophecy, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. So there's a number of things in this prophecy. What city do you think, Daniel? Yeah, Jerusalem. What sanctuary? Temple. So Daniel was predicting a day that the city of Jerusalem would be destroyed and the sanctuary, the temple, would be destroyed. And what people did this? The Romans. And Daniel made that prophecy before the Roman Empire was even in existence. Based on the verse, when would it happen?
The Messiah was cut off.
Yeah, what would that refer to, the Messiah being cut off? Yeah, the death of Christ. And what would that little phrase mean, but he was cut off, but not for himself? Yeah, he died for us. It's amazing the theology that Daniel puts into that prophecy. Jesus, the Messiah, was cut off. He was crucified, but he didn't die for himself. He died for us. But after his death, Daniel predicted that the city and temple in Jerusalem would be destroyed, and that was fulfilled in 70 A.D. The phrase, the people of the prince who is to come, there's been, I guess, debate or different views, I should say, on who that prince is. Have you ever heard any theories on that? Yeah. The one I lean toward is Titus. He was the leader. He was the general that led the destruction on the city in 70 A.D. He later, just a short time later, became the emperor of Rome. So I believe that's who Daniel is referring to there. So there's a prophecy that was made. I've already tipped my hand that it would be fulfilled, but Jesus picked up on that prophecy in Luke 21:20. Said, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is near. And they will fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all nations. Who? Who will fall? The Jews. So that prophecy was fulfilled in 70 A.D. What's that reference? They will be led away captive into all nations. The dispersion of the Jews. And that history tells that 1 million Jews were killed when the Romans invaded Israel in 70 A.D. And the rest fled and were dispersed, as Jesus said, into all the nations. And that happened, and it was true down through the centuries that the Jews were not in the land of Israel except for just a very small number. But the Jews, by the millions have lived in other nations down through the centuries as a fulfillment of Jesus' prophecy in Luke 21:20. So there's another example. What does this have to do with why we should believe the Bible? Huh? Yeah, came true. Luke is a book of the Bible, right? Luke, Daniel, we've seen Daniel's prophecy came true. We've seen that, of course, it was Jesus' prophecy, but Luke, it's in the Gospel of Luke, so that, therefore, it's a Bible prophecy that was fulfilled right down to the detail.
Didn't Luke write this before it happened? Well, 70 AD. That's recording what Jesus said.
Yeah, that's a good question. I should know the answer to that, but I don't.
Well, it's also astonishing how, things were predicted, not only did it take 78 days, but the day, the time, it was just amazing, the accuracy of it.
Right. It's been calculated that, well, this had to do with, when we read about Palm Sunday, I didn't put this in here, but Daniel predicted the timing of Palm Sunday right down to the day. There's been studies and calculations done where the prophecy was fulfilled right down to the day that Jesus was recognized as king. Even though they rejected him, they recognized him on Palm Sunday, but then a few days later they rejected him.
This dispersion, is this called deep dispersion? Is that what?
Well, that's what we call it, yeah. That's what historians or people call it, yeah. The dispersion. The diaspora is another term.
Bob, don't you think that in doing so, to me, in dispersing the Jews, it prevented a number of Jews, more Jews being killed because of the Holocaust and other things, by dividing and separating, spreading them out, it was harder for them to annihilate the entire population, the Jewish population.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
I think that was the prophecy, that's also, that is reality, that's what led to.
So you're seeing the diaspora as a way that God protected them. I mean, that may be that may be a good way to look at it, yeah.
How far, spread out were they already? Cause we know they had to come back for Pentecost, the ones that weren't living in Israel, right?
After 70 AD?
No, I'm talking like, we went over Pentecost where Jews that were in, as far as Asia would have
Yeah.
to come back, right?
Yeah.
So they already had some that were outside of Israel. Do we have an idea of how many were actually?
No. Nope, that's a good, interesting thought that you're bringing up, because there were Jews. We know that from Acts 2 that this was well before 70 AD, and even in the epistles, everywhere Paul went, he went to the Jew first. So there were Jews living in all around the Mediterranean. Uh-huh. And so it's not like every Jew was in Israel, but the diaspora, the leading away captive, is specifically related to the land itself, Jews living in the land. After 70 AD, there were virtually none. There was a remnant, but virtually none. Before 70 AD, there was I guess you could say, a remnant that were out there, but the vast majority were in the land of Israel. That's my understanding. And no matter what the percentage was, there was still, Israel was a Jewish land. It was Jews living in the land of Israel. Not so after 70 AD.
You could see their previous concern. I'm just reading through Ezra and Nehemiah right now, where it talks about it took them three different groups that they came back from Babylon, but not all came. So those that didn't come are those ones probably that dispersed in other places.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. Okay. So this was a dramatic fulfillment of prophecy, and the point, there's much we could say about it, but the topic is, why should we believe the Bible? And so what I've tried to do is just give examples of prophecies in the Bible that give us reason to know and believe that the Bible is the Word of God, because God is proving the Bible to be true through fulfilled prophecy. And we've looked at Jesus' birth, or the life of Jesus, let's say that, and then the fulfilled prophecy in 70 AD. And this last one is, I think, pretty exciting, fulfilled prophecy in the 20th century. So I want to read the prophecy of Ezekiel, written hundreds of years before Jesus, let alone thousands of years before the 20th century. The whole house of Israel, they indeed say, our hope is lost, and we ourselves are cut off. Let me stop there. Cut off from what? Yeah, the temple in the land of Israel. That's been the, Ezekiel was predicting a day that the whole house of Israel would say, our hope is lost, we're cut off. We're cut off from the land. We're cut off from the temple. Thus says the Lord God, behold, O my people, I will bring you into the land of Israel. Now, the timing of this prophecy comes after Israel is cut off, which would mean after what? After 70 AD. Ezekiel predicted that, God through Ezekiel predicted that Israel would be cut off from the land, but the day would come that God promised he would bring the Jews back into the land of Israel. And that seemed impossible down through the centuries. It just seemed impossible for anybody that might have read that prophecy because of the dispersion. But there were those at the end of the 1800s that took that prophecy seriously, and it's quite a story. But anyway, to make a long story short, through a series of events, God, since 1900, which wasn't that long ago. Yeah, most of us weren't alive in 1900, but it wasn't long after that we came along, right? I think everybody here in this, maybe, I think everybody. Justin, what year were you born? 82. Yeah, okay. Josh, when were you born? 81. You guys are a lot older than I thought. So there's nobody here that's less than, that wasn't born in the 20th century.
Why didn't you ask me how old I was?
Yeah, well, how old are you?
You don't know. I'm young.
How old are you?
42, born in 81.
Born in 81. We've all, were born in the 20th century, so this is relevant to us. In the 20th century, God fulfilled this prophecy very dramatically. Because in 1900, from what I've read, there were 25,000 Jews living in the land. That's about the population of Marshall. Not that many. Does anybody know how many there are, Jews there are in the land today? 7 million. I think it was just this year that it turned 7 million. It had been in the 6 million, upper 6 million, but it topped 7 million, I think just this year. That's just an amazing fulfillment of prophecy that we have lived to see happen in our day. And I think that shouts to us a couple of things. One is that God's at work. He's moving to set the stage for the return of Christ. Because the Jews had to be back in the land before the return of Christ to the earth. All the prophecies of the tribulation center on Israel and on the Jews. They had to be back in the land, and God has fulfilled that prophecy in the 20th century.
Bob, I think I read somewhere where no other people group have been scattered and regathered like Israel.
Yeah.
It just hasn't happened.
And nothing like it in all of history, right? And then Jesus made a prophecy in Luke 21:24. Jerusalem will be trampled by Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. So let's take the first part. Now, when Jesus made that prophecy, Jerusalem was not trampled by Gentiles. Who was in control? Who was sovereign over Jerusalem? Jews. What's a Gentile? Not, yeah, yeah, yeah. Anybody that's not, somebody what?
Somebody probably never
You know,
He can't help you.
For a guy, that's coming from a guy named Abraham. When I first met your father, I asked him, are you Jewish? And he said, no, but I wish I was. Huh? Yeah. I'd never forgotten that. It was very moving that he said that. Yeah.
Repeat that one more time, Bill. What did you say?
Somebody gotta play retail.
All right. So Jesus predicted the day that Jerusalem would no longer be, or would not be under the Jewish sovereignty. It would be under the sovereignty of Gentiles, and that was fulfilled. When? What? 70 AD. And it remained, and Jesus said, but in the prophecy, Jesus said that would come to an end someday. Someday the times of the Gentiles will be fulfilled. And within the verse, he defined, that's his terminology that he's defining here. Trampling by the Gentiles defines the times of the Gentiles. I'm going to repeat that. For Jerusalem to be trampled by Gentiles defines the times of the Gentiles. And, well, let me ask, there's a number of ways I could say this. Is Jerusalem still trampled by Gentiles? No. Since when?
June 67.
Yeah, June of 67. And what happened then? The 6-Day War. And the 6-Day War, Israel was being threatened. Israel knew that the surrounding Arab nations were going to attack. Israel fought to preempt that attack and defend itself. Israel was not seeking to regain Jerusalem. From the reading I've done, they were just trying to preserve themselves. In the process of a defensive attack, they moved forward against the forces, particularly Jordan. Jordan was in control of Jerusalem, and in pressing against Jordan, they I think the word is surprisingly, ended up in control of the old city of Jerusalem.
They abandoned it. Apparently they saw angelic beings, from what I've heard, on TV. But, the Jordanians abandoned Jerusalem.
Okay, I hadn't heard about the angelic beings, but for whatever happened, God was at work. Yeah. So that prophecy was fulfilled. The times of the Gentiles ended in June of 1967. So Israel is still sovereign over Jerusalem. So what time, if we're not living in the times of the Gentiles, what times are we living in? Yeah. We've been living in the times of the Jews as defined by Jesus here. Since 1967, 56 years. So this is a dramatic fulfillment of prophecy, and many of us were alive to see this happen. And some of you have heard about it. Weren't alive then, Josh, but yeah, I was. I remember it. I was graduating from high school that week. And I heard about it, but I didn't pay attention to it. I didn't know. But I remember at our church there was an older man, and he taught a Sunday school class. And I remember walking down the hallway, and there was a sign on the door that said this week's lesson. I forget what he said, but the fulfillment of prophecy. The fulfillment of prophecy in the 6-Day War, something like that. So I remember that as a teenager thinking, wonder what that was about. I didn't go to the class because I had a youth class I went to, but thought, man, there was somebody in our church that even when it was happening knew the significance of what it was. It took me a number of years later to learn, wow, that was significant what happened that week. And that's an understatement. It's extremely significant what happened in June of 67 because it's a clear indicator that God's truly at work setting the stage for the return of Christ. And he has been through the 20th century and especially in the fulfillment in 1967. Bill?
Well, after 78 days, was Israel pretty much barren land from that time until the Jews came back? Did anybody, I think it was pretty barren that whole time.
Yeah, barren's probably a good word.
Mark Twain said it was.
He said it was ungodly, unforsakeable place. I
Yeah.
can't see why anybody lives there.
Yeah, and the Mark Twain reference is a good one because he was obviously a very prolific writer, and he went over to Israel in the late 1800s, I think, and wrote, what did he call it? You said it? Barren, what, didn't you? Desolate, yeah, uninhabitable, yeah.
Agnostic, from what I understand, too. He wasn't a believer.
Right, right. Okay, the point here is that fulfilled prophecy gives us confidence that the Bible is true. And we not only have fulfilled prophecy related to, what happened, 2,000 years ago. We have fulfilled prophecy that what's happened that we've lived to see in our lifetime. Question or comments about this topic? Why should we believe the Bible?
Well, don't you think these last two are right now, the war that's going through, that all the anti-Semitism, all the propaganda against Israel, these are the two most things that you can bring up to speak to someone about Israel.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
I think God himself really through Ezekiel with an explanation for him. If you go down to verse 14, it says, I will place you in your own land. Then you shall know that I, the Lord, have spoken it and performed it, says the Lord.
Yeah.
Just a side note, Mark said that the Jordanians saw angelic beings. A donkey saw an angelic being, so they're for sure. I don't know, if that really happened or not. I just think it's interesting that the Bible records that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that we have a great opportunity to talk to people about lots of things these days, because there is a lot of interest. Obviously, they can't miss it, that there's just so much talk about Israel and about the Jews. Last weekend, my two granddaughters were in a musical down in the Woodlands, and my son's in-laws were there. We all went down to see our grandkids, and we were having breakfast Saturday morning, and I was talking to my son's father-in-law. He goes to church, but that church doesn't teach anything about Bible prophecy. So anyway, he brought up that. Now he asked me what I was preaching on. So I told him what I was preaching on. I said, but last week I preached on the war in Israel. And he said, yeah, I just wonder what that's about. He said, Robert Jeffers at First Baptist Church in Dallas is advertising a book or something about, are we living in the last days? And I said, yeah, I think I saw that advertised. And he said, I don't believe that. I don't believe we're living in the last days. I don't believe that. So I thought, okay, what am I going to say? So I said, well, I think it's pretty significant that at the turn of the 20th century, that there were virtually just 20,000 Jews living in the land of Israel, and today there's 7 million. I said, I think God's shouting to us that we are approaching the last days, because God said he was going to bring the Jews back into the land. And we got interrupted and we didn't get to finish. But I said, you might want to go online and look at the message and see what you think. Well, we got home that night and he left a message on our answering machine. He said, I listened to the message and I agree with you. That is spot on, or something like that. And I was so excited that he, because when you look at these prophecies, it's just hard to say that that's a coincidence or that's an accident. So even my son's father-in-law, who was skeptical when he was just confronted with a simple statement about the Jews being brought in back, it got his attention and made him listen. And I think now he's convinced that, yeah, we may be living in the last days. I read a lot into his statement, but I don't know why he would have said it if he didn't agree with it. So I'm just bringing that up to say, I just had an example last weekend. I think we've got an opportunity to talk to people about what's going on, and hopefully it'll spur their interest in not only prophecy, but hopefully salvation, the message of salvation if they're not saved. So pray that God will give you an opportunity to talk about this.
I think it's a great, what you just said. If any of you haven't seen that message on the war in Israel from 2 weeks ago that Bob did, you should encourage every person that you know to look at it. You don't have to go into anything else other than say, go look at this particular video. This is extremely powerful because the majority of people in the world have never seen a timeline, much less identify a timeline with dates and biblical prophecy, which it's outlined real well in that lesson. And I think everybody that looks at it has to give it some consideration. I've talked to several people and had them go look at it, and they were all impressed and said something to that effect. They didn't know this, they'd never seen this before, and were extremely impressed with it.
Yeah.
So that's something all of us can just real easy. Just don't even get into anything. You need to look at this video and see what you think.
I shared it on Facebook on the public
Mhm.
view on Facebook. You never know who might see that.
Yeah, well, I was sure excited about my son's father-in-law. I've been concerned for him, and this was an open door. Yeah. And I think we've all got an open door. We're living in some amazing days right now, and it's just amazing what we're looking at here about these prophecies. To live to see it fulfilled, and now to see everything being the center of the world. The world is focused on Israel. It's amazing.
That in itself is amazing.
It is.
This little tiny country, well, we sure hear a lot about it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
how many wars and things have happened in the world that we hardly ever even hear about.
And it just underscores what we're talking about in this prophecy. We're living in the times of the Jews. Well, there's a sense in which the whole world would agree with that. Yeah, but Israel is the issue. This whole situation in Israel is what's got the whole world questioning, what are we going to do? How are we going to fix it? What's going to happen? Right. So we're living in the times of the Jews. Yeah.
I watch Fox News here so often, and when they come back, it says either war in Israel or Israel at war. I can't remember which way they say it, but that's always the initial headline before they go into their conversation with people.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. I don't know about the other channels.
The other channels are telling us how Taylor Swift is in football.
All right, we digress. All right. Let's get out our next paper. We'll just get introduced to it. Can we trust all of the Bible? We talked about why we should believe the Bible, but the next topic is, can we trust all of the Bible? Now, can you guess what lies behind that question? Why would I raise the question, can we trust all of the Bible? What do you think would be the issue there?
See, you cherry picking?
Some of it's easier to believe than other parts, Rob.
Yeah. And what are some examples of parts of the Bible that some people don't trust? Jonah and the whale, or the Jonah and the fish, creation,
Jesus.
flood. Huh?
Job,
Okay, Job. All right. So let me ask this question. Can a person believe some of the Bible but not all of the Bible?
That's their choice.
Depends on the spiritual maturity.
Okay. It's a intriguing question. I think I got a mixed response here. Can a person believe some of the Bible but not all of the Bible? I'm repeating the question because it's a thought-provoking question.
They can say that, so.
to me, the answer should be yes, but institutionally, through many denominations, the answer is no. There are denominations that say you don't actually have to trust all of the Bible to be Christian.
Okay.
There's some that don't even use the Old Testament, just use the New Testament.
All right.
Well, this is definitely the issue of the entire world you run into. This is the issue.
Yes.
They do not believe the Bible is true. That all of it is true.
Okay.
They think a lot of it is made up by man.
Okay.
It's a fairy tale.
But yeah. But what I think, tell me if I'm hearing you correctly. There are some that say, because I don't believe this part of the Bible, then I don't believe any of it. Is that what you're saying? Or if this part of the Bible isn't true, how can I trust any of it?
Yeah, I think that's prevalent.
I get into this.
On most people.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
George?
One of the things I hear is, do you really believe that the writers of the Bible were inspired by God? How do you know that? You know, is this really the word of God, or is this just made up by man?
Right. Okay.
Or the assumption that we as humans err, and we err all the time, so therefore the Bible can't be the word of God, which is that he's man which sinful and error.
My favorite question to ask people who question the Bible is, can you tell me or show me one single thing that's in this book that's ever been proven wrong?
And?
I'm 76 years old, and nobody's ever been able to show me one thing that's proven wrong.
Okay.
They say it contradicts, that's a big one. Because I talked about it one time when he was gone, that the American Atheistic Association has a website, and they've just got pages of contradictions in, different passages that contradict, supposedly.
All right.
Take it out of context.
I feel like if we've learned anything in this Bible study, it's perfectly okay to, question to see if it was translated correctly. Is you found like certain like translations that they used the wrong word. So I don't see there's any problem being skeptical on was this translated correctly. But the original text, I think you should definitely trust that it is the written word of God.
Okay. Well, I appreciate this was a warm-up. We'll pick it up next week. Let's pray.